I'm Nicole Beatty, the CEO and Chief Community Builder with Capacity for Community, and I'm so excited because we are kicking off the first ever community conversation called Impact Unfiltered. And when I thought about launching this conversation series, this wonderful woman, Danielle, came to mind. If I was to have a soul sister in the sector, it would be you, Danielle. So Danielle, thank you for being here. And if you just want to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Nicole. I'm thrilled to be here and thrilled to be your soul sister. The feeling is mutual, I can assure you. My name is Danielle Boucher. I am a principal with Philanthropica, a consulting firm based out of Montreal. But most importantly, I'm a human on a relentless pursuit for impact. I've worked in the charitable sector for nearly 20 years, and I have the privilege of working every day with organizations of all sizes, working to address and solve some of the societal problems that continue to plague us as a community.
Yeah, I love that. You always have the most amazing way of introducing yourself, but also introducing the projects and the causes that you're working on. So thanks for sharing a little bit about you. Danielle, as we were talking while setting up this conversation, this is all about an unfiltered, casual conversation about the social impact sector, a sector that we've both been working in for several decades. We've collaborated, we've traveled the world together. And yeah, I'm just so excited to just ask a few questions where we're going to really be focusing on inspiration and impact, and hopefully our listeners feel exactly that, inspired to go out into the world after hearing this conversation and continuing to mobilize their community change and achieving their impact goals. So let's start with that. What inspired you? I understand you have a background in museums, but how did you go from the arts into this sector? What inspired you on your path?
So that's a great question. So yeah, I'm a recovering museologist. I did that for a long time, and the story is interesting actually. So I met one of my current business partners while working in my last role as a curator at the McCord Museum of Canadian History at McGill. And in my capacity as the head of education and cultural programming, I had all kinds of great ideas on what we should be doing to make art and culture accessible to different kinds of people. Art and culture, unfortunately, with education, are often the poor cousin of, healthcare and military. So, there's often a lack of funding. And so working with the then president of the foundation to find funding for the projects that we were doing, I really saw another side of that whole world. I really had no idea what that looked like. And through that relationship, I was introduced to other people who work in the fundraising space, and just hearing their stories of the work that they did, it really inspired me. And one day I was attending an event and I heard a donor talk from their perspective about what they had done. And this was a significant leadership donor, $1 million donor. And this person actually stood up and thanked the organization for the opportunity, tearfully. And it sent a shiver right up my spine. I thought, this is interesting. There is a powerful feeling that comes with gratitude and being able to make a change. And I began to think about how it would feel to be on the other side of the table in those conversations. And I decided to make a shift. And moved into fundraising full time and have never looked back.
I love that. I love that. I think a lot of us fall into fundraising and then we evolve into the different part of the ecosystem that is this wonderful sector. Very much like you had an arts communications background, started working in this space after volunteering with several organizations and getting a job with one of those nonprofits. So, but I love how you hearing a story and the sentiment of gratitude is what inspired you to make that sector a career shift. When we talk about gratitude, I don't know about you, but I link gratitude with impact quite a bit. And perhaps that segues into the theme of this conversation is have you had a recent story, or is there a project that you're working on or approach that you like to take when you're thinking about impact, whether that's affecting change, scaling up impact for a project, or your own personal philosophy or approach to impact generation and impact building? What does that look like for you?
That's a great question. Um, Luckily, we're at the point now where we can be very intentional with the organizations that we choose to work with.
Mm.
And for me personally, because of my personal journey, my beliefs, my values, what really compels me, I like to work with organizations who have a direct impact on the humans. Like, what's the impact on the humans? And the filter internally for, are we going to work on a project or not, is it a fuck yeah? Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that on this podcast, but I just said it. And so when I'll be looking through, we get calls, and is it a yeah? If it is, we go forward. And I'll share one recent project that really floored me. So I'm based out of New Brunswick. And 2 years ago, an organization came to us wanting help to build a perishable food rescue center. And so, sidebar, one of the things I love about working as a consultant in the charitable sector is that we're on an endless quest for knowledge. It's important for us to understand the sector in which we're working when we're working with clients. And so there's this continual learning curve. Learning about food insecurity in Canada over the last 2 years has floored me. So this client came to us. We were actually full, and the CEO said to me, 1 in 5 families in New Brunswick doesn't have enough to eat. What does that mean? It means they have to make a choice between buying medications, getting snacks for their children at school, paying their rent, paying their car payment, like what have you. They have to make these choices. And that just absolutely floored me. In working with that client over the last 2 years, I have seen such engagement and momentum from the community when being faced with the reality that we're still dealing with this problem in 2024.
Yeah.
That
Further
project
escalated by, post-pandemic, these public health crises within a global health crisis and the drivers around cost of living. Yeah, for sure.
So from an impact perspective, a project that has really impacted me and that has allowed me to see just how big of a ripple effect one small project can have, that's my heart project over the last few years.
And that heart project, I think, goes back to what you were talking about, is working on projects that really have that human-oriented impact. And I mean, you know how passionate I am about food security. I started a food security organization over a decade ago, and so can completely appreciate how not only in today how prevalent and in demand food resources are, but a capacity building project such as a food rescue center. I mean, if that's not impact across all levels. So thanks for sharing that with us. I want to spend our last few minutes in our conversation. I mean, we could talk all day and probably all night, but shifting into what challenges are you facing, or do you think our sector is facing these days? And maybe building off of challenges, are there certain policies in the sector or advocacy that you would like to see changed? I mean, you don't have to address that, but overall, what I'm trying to get at is a challenge-oriented question. So what do you think the sector, or you in particular, are facing these days?
That's another very good question. At the work in the charitable sector is such a rewarding sector to work in. I feel like I won the professional lottery every single day. What irks me most currently, and I mean, has irked me, there's a prevalent poverty mindset that still exists in the charitable sector and that is perpetuated. We're seeing a shift, but it's still perpetuated by boards of directors and donor attitudes where we feel like we need to do everything on a shoestring.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if you read Dan Pallotta's Flat Org Chart book.
Mhm, mhm.
Have you read it? And so he talks about, he's got such an interesting way of positioning the arguments that we need to be making. He talks about what it took for NASA to go to the moon in 1961,
Right.
how it required collaboration among hundreds of organizations over years and huge budgets. But they saw the goal, they needed to get to the moon, and they made it happen. And he talks about how we, as a charitable sector, in order to address the ongoing social problems that we have, which are not insignificant, we need to have a NASA mindset.
Yeah.
And
Mm,
it's difficult for organizations to engage in even thinking about having such a mindset with such limited resources. And so I feel that, to go back, that the poverty mindset that still exists often in the charitable sector, I think, is a huge hurdle. I
mhm.
think some of the administrative burdens that charities face with paperwork and reporting creates a huge administrative burden that takes away from mission oriented stuff,
Mm, mm,
right?
mm.
So getting to a point where we have more funding, we lessen the administrative burden. And I think another one that irks me is advocacy limitations. And
Yeah.
so oftentimes organizations will receive funding from governments and or other types of funders that preclude them from engaging in significant lobbying or advocacy work. And I think that that is a barrier to them being able to address the root causes of the social problems that we are mitigating, not solving, but mitigating through our efforts, where we should be looking at how do we extract the root of the problem versus mitigating over time.
Right, right, right. And I couldn't agree with you more. And again, the challenges around, because how are we supposed to, I'm using a collective we as a sector, scale or advocate at a level? And I can appreciate that, especially being a registered charity, there's the limitations around your political activity. But how are we supposed to counteract all the other loud lobbying, which is necessary in some regards? I mean, not going to get into that right now, but I guess what I'm trying to say, and maybe what I'm hearing you say, and please clarify if I'm incorrect, is yeah, how can we be as loud and action oriented in our advocacy, to complement or sometimes have to counteract what other sectors and industry, are bringing forward.
Absolutely. And on that note, I would add, we're seeing more and more collaboration and togetherness
Mhm.
in the sector, but there's always a fear. Organizations aren't sure if they want to collaborate. Who do we want to bring to the table? And I think the future for solving large scale complex problems needs to include collaboration on a deep level with multiple parties in
Mhm.
order to really get the traction that we need. And so organizations need to really look at their work from a different lens and say, who can the helpers be, and how do we dissipate our discomfort with opening the hood of the car for everyone to see, so that we can work together in an effective way.
Exactly. And I love that, that discomfort and through that lens of collaboration, because I don't think advocacy has to be this hardcore activism, especially like I know in a lot of work that I do with government relations, it's when your funder is a core funder can also be sometimes from the policy lens at where you want to see change. Or I know, working with a lot of mid-sized organizations, they have donors that, this is a very polarizing issue. We ourselves don't really want to get too in there. But at the same time, I sometimes wonder if advocacy is, I'm seeing a lot of organizations just kind of taking back their own narrative and being like, you know what? We started at the neighborhood level. That's where the change is planted and that's where the change grows. So we're going to continue to participate, but we're not going to get distracted and we're going to put our resources into our mission. And we're going to continue to focus on the work that we were created to do, but that what we're funded to do. I don't know if you notice that. I mean, we can get so distracted and then we talk about lean resources. And sometimes when we're distracted, those resources also can go with that distraction rather than, being very mission and community focused.
Agreed.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Danielle, I mean, again, I could have so many, this could be more
We
of a
could
dinner
talk all day.
conversation than a virtual conversation. But as I said, when I thought about kicking off these community conversations, there's no one I could have thought, now my English isn't making sense. I just love that you were able to join me with this. I mean, we always have the most amazing conversations, and now our community gets a chance to have that conversation with us. For folks who are listening, I will share Danielle's contact information both on my website and in the relevant social media posts, all the areas where you find your information. Danielle, any closing comments?
I would have a closing comment. Anyone who's, on the heels of everything we've just talked about, oftentimes, especially when we're dealing with volunteers, right? When we're campaigning or we're starting to engage new people, everyone has a limited sense of their power.
Mhm.
What can I do? What can I possibly do? Every single thing, every act of good that we intentionally choose to do has a ripple effect.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Start small, do the thing. If you're volunteering once a week in a hospital, a homeless shelter, or a soup kitchen, do it. It
Mhm.
makes an impact. If you're a fundraiser who's growing into their career, just keep doing what you're doing. Remember the why. Every single action has a reaction. And
Mhm.
over time, our collective actions combined create big waves. So
Oh,
just do it.
I love that. You actually got me thinking about, I read a book. I'm gonna have to go find the title because I forget it. But it's all about the downstream effect, the ripple effect. And sometimes we have to eddy out of the river. We have to get out of the river to rest and then get back into the river to paddle. Sorry, that just came out of the top of my head as you were using the ripple effect and the wave analogy. And now I need to go find this book because I feel like everyone needs to read it. Again, Danielle, you took the unfiltered to the level with some profanity. I don't think we'll get kicked off any social media report.
Sorry.
But no, but this is what I want the sector to understand is we're real people doing real work, right? And sometimes we just have to be able to, all the time, I think we just have to be able to have that open conversation and a respectful discourse. And so I know I can always look to you to tell me how it is. So thank you for joining with me. To folks who are listening, I find myself saying a lot these days, be gentle with your heart and please be kind to others. Danielle, it's always a pleasure, and I wish you all the best of luck.
Thank you so much. And it's always a pleasure. And I would love to read that book. Let me know what the title is.
Excellent. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.